Hey, what's going on, guys? This is Daniel, one half of the Kwok Brothers. And in this video, we're going to talk about how to properly break down numbers on a rental property. We put out a lot of videos related to real estate investing. So if you're looking to become a real estate investing master, then continue to watch our videos and, of course, subscribe. Let's go ahead and talk about the topic at hand, right? How to break down properly numbers on a rental property. Now, guys, in my years of being in this industry, right, I've gone to a lot of different conferences. I've spoken at some, I've done meetups, and I've met a lot of different people in the real estate investing industry. And one of the things that scratches my head time and time again is the way people break down their numbers on a rental property. So today, I'm gonna give you guys a full breakdown in terms of how I would personally break down and analyze a real estate investing rental property deal. So before we go ahead and do that, obviously we have to talk about, well, where do we get these numbers? Because I, for one, don't trust a profit and loss statement or an offering memorandum. Now, what are these things, right? So for those of you guys that don't know, or maybe you're new to real estate investing, a profit and loss statement is simply information that a seller is going to give you that pretty much talks about all the profits and all the losses. Now, we typically call that an income and expense report or whatever it may be, or whatever your accounting jargon may be. But usually it comes in the form of a Excel sheet, right? And typically most people who manage their own properties will use Microsoft Excel or use Google Sheets to pretty much track all their expenses, all their income. And the other, which is an offering memorandum, is typically what a broker or realtor is going to send you for the reviewing of a real estate investing property. Now, in that offering memorandum, they'll tell you, stuff about the market, they'll tell you stuff about the property, and they'll show you pictures and, et cetera, all the great information that you should know about the property. Now, we may go ahead and look over that offering memorandum and we might think, wow, like this thing is really nice, the pictures are great, and the income is phenomenal, and here's the cash flow, and we're gonna make so much money. And guys, looking at the offering memorandum, it may seem great. Now, I've always made the joke that an offering memorandum is a lot like a Tinder profile, right? It's like internet dating profile. Now, what do internet dating profiles and offering memorandums have in common? They both distort the truth, right? I'm not gonna say lie because I don't think it ever gets that far, but let's be real. If you're dating on the internet and you click on that person, or you swipe left or swipe right, whatever, and you arrange a time for you to meet or date, and you go and you see that person in real life, I'm not sure if you've ever had the experience of being disappointed, but a lot of times reviewing a real estate investing property by looking at an offering memorandum is a lot like that. Guys, their incentive is to pretty much make the property seem like it's the greatest thing in the world. Why? Because, well, it's created by a realtor and or broker. And I'm not saying that a realtor or broker is someone bad or they're not looking out for you. Guys, I've met plenty of brokers and realtors who are kind-hearted and they genuinely wish the best for myself, for everyone involved in the party. But let's be real, their financial incentive, they're aligned to have you buy that property, number one, to buy it as quickly as possible, and number two, have that purchase price be as high as it possibly can, because, well, not only do they make more commission because the purchase price is higher and their commission is a percentage of that purchase price, but it also does great for their future business because, well, if you buy a property at a purchase price of this high, well, guess what they can do the next week? They can go to the next buyer and say, look, this property got sold at this, so you should also buy it at that, right? It's all very obvious, right? Now, we all understand that, right? So if we're not gonna use an offering memorandum, if we're not gonna use a profit and loss statement, well, Daniel, what do we use? What do you personally use to verify the numbers and analyze the deal properly? Well, guys, analyzing the deal is a lot like cooking, right? And if you're a chef, you wanna be able to get the best ingredients possible, right? You're not gonna be able to make a good dish that's healthy, that's delicious, that's nutritious, that people are gonna love, unless you get good and fresh ingredients. And just like how a chef is gonna look far and wide for the best and the freshest ingredients, I want you doing the same things. So instead of using a profit and loss statement or an offering memorandum, I personally like to use three things. I like to use, number one, a rent roll, because, well, that's very easy to verify and that number is not going to change a whole lot. And that's pretty universal in terms of how much this property makes in terms of its gross rental income. The second thing I like to look at is what's called a T12 report. Now, this is going to be different, guys, for whether you're buying a single family home or whether you're buying a 4-unit or whether you're buying an apartment complex. A single family home income is typically more predictable along with its expenses, right? What I'm referring to more so if you're looking at like a 3-flat or a 4-unit building or bigger than that. The third thing is what's known as a Schedule E or a Form 8825. Now, what is a Schedule E or a Form 8825? Well, these are actually official IRS tax forms that report income and expenses for an investment property. If you have the property under an LLC or any type of entity, you're going to be looking at a Form 8825. If you have the property under your own name, you're actually going to be seeing it under a Schedule E, or if it's a trust or for that matter. Now, guys, let me say that I am not a real estate attorney. I'm not a legal professional or a tax professional by any means. This is just my experience that I've seen, and these are the documents that I like to ask for because, again, just like a chef who needs fresh ingredients to make a good dish, I want to have the best tools to get the most accurate numbers. Now, obviously, I've said it before, guys, and I want to remind you again that if you're looking at a single family house or a duplex, all these things may not be as necessary. Still probably going to be able to go off the rent roll, and if you want to ask for the T12 report, you absolutely can, because that's going to detail every single expense that you're going to be able to see and notify yourself about for the coming years in terms of you owning the property. But in terms of buying like the 3, 4, or even something bigger, right? Obviously, I would ask for the Schedule E and the Form 8825. So now we know exactly where to get our best numbers. Now, how do we verify them? Because guys, remember, you can get the most freshest ingredients all you want, but if you're not preparing it and washing it the right way, there's potential for you getting sick or you being harmed or any way, shape, or form. So just like how we prepare ingredients, we want to prepare numbers by verifying them. Now, I have 2 ways that I typically verify the numbers on a rental property. The first way is to ask questions, right? I ask questions to the seller. So once I have that Form 8825 or that Schedule E or that T12, I'm able to ask the seller, hey, I see that there's a $15,000 thing for repairs under here. What was that repair? Can you send me pictures? Can you send me the receipt in terms of what was done? Can you show me a summary? Whatever it may be. But I pretty much just want to get more information on it in terms of what happened and how they managed the property and what exactly was the bill. Why? It gives me a better understanding and a more accurate picture in terms of what I'm walking into. And the more I know now, the less I have to deal with later because it gives me more time to prep and set expectations or put away in reserve. So I always like to ask questions to the seller in terms of, hey, what was this? What was that? Can you give me a little bit more information on that? And if you do, can you show me proof, like pictures, a summary, receipt, an invoice, whatever it may be that this thing got done and that's exactly what you say it was. The second thing I like to do is look online and verify the information through different public records. Now, the big thing I like to do this for are taxes. Now, the reason why I say that is because as many experienced landlords like myself or anybody else will tell you that taxes, typically speaking, will be one of the largest expenses that you have on the rental property. And that's something that you will always have. You may have a year where you have 0 maintenance or 0 repairs. You may have a year where it's phenomenal and there's no vacancy and every tenant pays on time. But one of the things that is guaranteed is the fact that you'll pay taxes on your property, especially like my home state of Illinois, where our taxes are ridiculous, right? Same thing if you live in California or New York. So 2 things, guys, to summarize the verifying the expenses, you again ask questions and you also verify through public records, i.e. in this scenario, taxes. Let's go to the whiteboard and let me show you guys how I personally would analyze and break down numbers on a rental property. So let's say for this case scenario that it's a 4-unit. So we got a 4-unit building and each unit rents out for $1,000 a month. We get $4,000 a month. We multiply that by 12 and we get $48,000 a year. Now let's go ahead and start breaking down the expenses first. Now, one of my favorite quotes in real estate is protect the downside and the upside will always take care of itself. And I actually advise my students, my one-on-one coaching clients to do the exact same thing, right? Always look for reasons to not do the deal before even doing the deal. That's one of the best exercises that I take my coaching clients, my students through, and it's done wonders, right? It's actually avoided a ton of bad deals, hundreds of bad deals that could have happened that were avoided, and it's allowed us to put focus on the good deals that we want to do. So we've got our gross income, our gross annual income, which is $48,000. Let's go ahead and start breaking down the expenses. Now, I call these expenses the big 3. Well, why is that? Because in my experience, these 3 expenses are the biggest ones that you're going to have to deal with in your investing career. The big 3 are taxes, maintenance, and management. Now let's go ahead and first start with the taxes. The taxes can have a very wide range. Guys, I've seen taxes in investment property as low as 5% of gross income all the way to 35% of gross income. You heard that right, folks. I actually was analyzing and I was actually about to buy 20 single family houses in a suburb of Chicago. It was in the same county as the Chicago, the major city. I looked at the Schedule E and I looked at the T12, and sure enough, the taxes were 35% of gross income. I couldn't believe it. It was ridiculous. So, depending on what state you're investing in, obviously, if you're investing in Florida compared to Illinois versus Texas versus California, your range is going to be a little different. I'm going to say for the sake of the example that most properties range between 10 to 15%. So for the example, let's meet in the middle and let's use 12.5% for our taxes. Moving on to maintenance. So maintenance, the number I like to use commonly is 10%. Now, does that mean that it's going to be 10% every single year? No, not exactly. And of course, it depends on a lot of different things, right? Is your property a Class A property, meaning that it's got phenomenal location, it's, you're talking about as turnkey as you could possibly get, everything is new, the tenants are great, the birds are chirping, everything is, lolly-dolly-da, right? Now, as opposed to a Class D property where, we call it the ghetto, right? It may not be as nice people. You don't want to walk around there during the night. Windows might get shattered. You may have things that are just not up to par in terms of condition, quality. These are where you may find, bad tenants or / slumlords if you want to look at the other side of things. So, obviously the maintenance can range depending on the property that you have. I'm going to use 10% because that's honestly the average that I've seen based on my investment property and different people's portfolios in terms of looking at their numbers. So let's go ahead and use 10%. Now let's move on to management. Now management can range between, I've seen management costs as low as 5% all the way up to 15%. Now property managers obviously make money outside of their management fees, but of course that falls under different categories. But for today's example, I'm going to use 8%. Now the whole big three should give you around 30% of your gross income every single year. Now again, I'm not saying that you're going to get exactly 30% every single year. This is typically an average, right? I am willing to bet, however, that if you were to hold the property for 10, 15, 20 years, if you looked at all your expenses, chances are your taxes, maintenance, management will fall under each of its respective categories, totaling about 30%, right? Let's move on to other expenses. We have stuff like insurance. Insurance, based on my portfolio and different portfolios that I've seen from other investors, typically are between 2 to 3%. Let's move on to utilities. Now, utilities, obviously, it also depends as well, right? You may be paying for utilities or the tenants may be paying for utilities, but based on my experience, you're going to be at around 5%. And the last thing that I want to include is vacancy. And I'm going to put vacancy at 5% as well. Now, again, guys, these numbers are based on what I've seen around my area, my portfolio, along with different portfolios that I've seen as well. You may have different numbers depending on where you're investing, or what type of condition, the location, right? I mean, I always say real estate is local. It depends on your local market. So you may have different numbers, give and take different type of scenarios. Now, let's go ahead and move on to the specific numbers, right? If we're looking at 12.5% of $48,000 in terms of gross income, what do we get? Well, if we do the math and if we do our calculations, and if you want to follow along at home and pause the video and use your calculator on your phone to pretty much run the numbers with me, you're more than welcome to do so. But doing the calculations that I've done previously, 12.5% of $48,000 is going to get you $6,000. Maintenance is going to get you $4,800. Management is going to get you about $3,800, right? $3,840 to be exact, right? And then we got insurance, right? Insurance, we're looking at about $1,200, right? If we're going between 2 to 3% and going right in the middle. With 5%, we're getting $2,400, and same thing with vacancy. Now, if we add up all the numbers, right? We added 30% plus 2 to 3% plus 5, right? We're going to get, based on our numbers here, about 42.3% in terms of what's known as our expense ratio. And that is the ratio in terms of how much our expenses are according to our gross income. You might be saying, well, Daniel, you forgot about one big thing. And you're absolutely right, I did. And it's repairs. Now, repairs are also one of the biggest expenses that you'll see on a property. However, is it predictable? No, right? You may have a year where you have 0 repairs, period, and you may have a year where you have to repair 5 or 6 things. I'm talking about roof, right? Let's just list them off that I've seen. Roofs, you may have to replace/repair the furnace, right? Porches, siding, right? And the list can go on and on and on and on. I've gotten large $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 bills, or even $15,000 bills for roofs and furnaces and porches and sidings and different things. I mean, you name it. All sorts of things seems to come up when you're owning a rental property and you're being a landlord. It's definitely not as cheap or as easy as some of our tenants may think, but nevertheless, it is what it is, right? So here's how I like to pretty much predict repairs. Because again, guys, we want to do our best to predict the numbers and get the most accurate picture in terms of what it's going to look like once we own the property and how we're going to manage it and how we're going to prepare. So one of the things that I like to do is I like to ask around in that local area, depending on whether it's local or whether it's somewhere else out of state. I like to contact people who do roofing jobs and who specialize in furnaces, porches, siding, whatever it may be, or a GC, or a very good GC if you have one in your pocket. And I like to ask the cost of some of these bigger items. So obviously a roof, right, that may cost you, depending on if you own a single family house or an apartment, that may cost you $4,000 or $5,000 in a single family house, all the way to like $15,000, $20,000 if you own a large apartment complex. So what I like to do is I like to take those big type of bills. So let's say on a 4-unit, it's gonna cost us $8,000 for a new roof. And what I like to do is I like to ask the GC, the contractor, or whoever's gonna be doing that job, hey, what is the life cycle of that roof? And let's say the life cycle is 20 years. If it's 20 years, then I'll divide that $8,000 by 20, right? Which if we do our calculations, you're looking at about $400 for every single year if we do our calculations. So you add that $400 to your annual expense because, well, I want to be prepared for what happens in terms of these big ticket repair items. And what I like to do is I like to take these and I like to just put them in the reserves, right? I like to have a reserve account for any of my rentals in case something goes bad. That way, I'm not paying for it out of pocket or my cash flow isn't being hurt. And it's just, again, I like to plan ahead. I like to be proactive as opposed to being reactive. And that's very important if you're a real estate investor and you're a full-time landlord. So what I like to do personally is I like to pick the 3 to 4 biggest items on that list in terms of what it's going to cost me to repair or replace. And I like to divide it by the lifespan in terms of how long it's going to last for and add it into my expenses in terms of for that year. Now, let me share with you guys a statistic that actually is backed up by my own personal experience and experiences of other landlords. But on average, the expense ratio, the annual expense ratio for a landlord on average is going to be around 47%. Meaning that on average, across the board from Class A properties, Class B, C, and D, and to all across the country and all different types of landlords, it's gonna be at 47% on average. Now, again, you may be at higher, you may be at lower. It depends, right? Depends on a lot of things. Your location, depends on your team, and also your business plan and how well you execute that business plan, which again, is why I advise always get educated, get knowledgeable, because the more you learn, really the more you earn. So at 47%, we're actually at around the accurate number because, well, previously we're at 42.3, but if you include all the repairs that have been done, we're probably gonna get to around 47%. So in doing the numbers, let's go ahead and I'm gonna erase what we have here. So if you wanna take a picture, take it now, or you could really just pause the video. I don't know why I just told you that, but I'm gonna go ahead and erase this. And now we're gonna figure out our cash flow. So right now we have our net operating income, which we call our NOI. Now I'm gonna round up that number to about 50% in terms of the expense ratio, just because I like to be a little bit more conservative with my numbers, as you should when you're running your numbers as well. So if we take $48,000 in terms of our gross income, and we take a 50% expense ratio, what does that leave us for our net operating income? It leaves us $24,000. Now, are we done? Is that the amount of money that we're taking home every single year? No, not necessarily. We also have this thing called debt service. Now, that debt service is going to be different, whether you're purchasing on owner financing or you're going to a bank, or maybe you're buying a cash, which in that case, you wouldn't have a debt service. But let's say in this scenario, you're like 90% of people, you're going to leverage and you're going to have a debt service on the property. So let's say that, you go out and we buy this 4-unit building for $350,000, which is about $75,000 per unit, which my guess, would be that's probably a Class B or a Class C property. So again, we're just gonna focus on the middle of the road, right? The average, so to speak. You may have, a 4-unit in California that costs $4 million, right? Or you may have a property in the south side of Chicago where a 4-unit may cost you $60,000, right? But I'm gonna stay in the middle of the road and just use that $350,000 number, $75,000 per unit. Let's say we get a 5% interest rate. And let's say we get 25-year amortization. Now, let me say this, guys. The debt service depends on a lot of things. It depends on what your bankability is, right? The bank may give you a lower interest rate because you're less of a risk. It also depends on you, on your investing goals. You may be somebody who doesn't need the cash flow right now. If that's the case, you could turn that 25-year amortization to a 20-year amortization and focus more on the equity and pay off your property a lot sooner and, of course, pay less interest. Well, you may be somebody who needs more of the cash flow right now, and you may have to go with a 30-year amortization. Now, if that's the case, guys, I strongly recommend that you secure long-term fixed rate financing. Because again, unless you have the opportunity to secure that long-term fixed rate financing, there may be instances where the market tanks or the values drop. You may be forced to give back the property or lose the property under certain circumstances. So again, guys, be careful, be mindful, and of course, get educated before you do any of these moves. But for the sake of the example, I'm gonna use that 25-year amortization just because it's right in the middle. So again, if you don't have it, and if you haven't downloaded it yet, I suggest you download what's called Carl's Mortgage Calculator. It's an app, works for Android and also Apple, right? It's an app that you download. And it's an app that I actually use every single day and every time I analyze, properties and analyze investment deals. So I've actually already punched in numbers on Carl's Mortgage Calculator. And if we take a $350,000 purchase price with 5% interest, 25-year amortization, our monthly payment is actually $1,636.85 a month. And if we multiply that by 12, we will get $19,642.20. Now, of course, we take that debt service number, we subtract it by $24,000 because that's our net operating income. And once we go ahead and do that, we will get $4,357.80. That, my friends, is our cash flow. Now, if you want to go ahead and take it further and divide that number by 12, that's how much cash flow that you receive every single month. Now, again, guys, let me reemphasize. Is that number going to be the same every single year? No. On some years, you're going to cash flow $8,000. On some year, you may go negative. Matter of fact, in my experience of watching people do deals and having done deals on my own, the first year, you will most likely go negative, right? But of course, the longer we hold the property, the more we figure the building out, the more of a management structure we put in, and the more better of a team that we build, eventually leading us to lower expenses and a more well-oiled machine, right? I cannot stress how important that is. So on average, you'll probably cash flow around $4,357.80. So again, guys, I hope you enjoyed the content in this video. If there are questions that you have, concerns, whatever it may be, or there's things that you would add on, or you yourself want to add insight, comment down below. I try and do my best in terms of reading all the comments I possibly can, so that I can learn as well, and also I can find ways to help better serve you guys in terms of making YouTube videos. So thank you guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe and also share this video if you possibly can. It really helps us out a lot. And until then, I'll see you guys in the next one.